News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. Lots on tap, stacked program for you this evening. We have Kevin Michelizzi in Crimea, who will be joining us very shortly to update us on this overnight attack by Ukraine in Crimea, directed at a Russian patrol boat. Will tell you the truth about what happened there. We'll show you the effects of information warfare on the minds of people and the way they end up reacting or acting on the street. We have a new episode of Maverick Nights, our animated series. This episode titled Mind Control. So stay with me. We have quite a bit in store for you this evening. We'll sell you a ticket for the whole seat. But tonight's episode or installment of Maverick News will be so riveting, you'll only need the edge.
The information war is raging. Truth without integrity is worth nothing. Maverick News. Because those who have power and those who seek it must be held accountable.
The world is watching.
Join our family of truth seekers. Donate today and add your voice to the chorus of Maverick Nights. Donate at maverickdonations.com. Truth. Integrity. It's the Maverick way. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Kevin Michelizzi, welcome back.
Rick, thanks for having me back again. Seems we're seeing each other way too often these days.
Yes, indeed. The situation in the Black Sea seems to be escalating just a bit. Another ship hit overnight.
Yep.
Bring us up to date on what the situation is with that.
Well, it seems they've been trying to hit the bridge and ships for, about 5 days now. It's a daily or a nightly occurrence, depending on what time of day they decide to strike. But today they had a group of like 8 to 10 drones, sea-based drones, and they attacked the Sergei Kotov patrol boat. It's a large patrol ship. And this ship is really, its sole purpose is to patrol the seas for, protection. But these ships alone are not able to protect themselves. They have no anti-aircraft, no, anti-drone equipment, just a couple of machine guns. So it's like a coastal patrol boat.
Nice.
And, it was hit by several drones, and it did not sink immediately. The ship was, there was a tugboat nearby. They were going to tow it in, but they were waiting for orders from the Black Sea Fleet Command to allow them to tow it in, but due to bureaucracy, it was delayed. A couple of more drones came in to try to hit the ship, but a Mi-8 helicopter in the area took those drones out. But due to the delay, the ship did ultimately sink. So the crew was rescued.
Well, that's a good
They
thing.
al-
So there was the
yeah.
entire crew rescued, as far as you know? No
As far as
casualties.
I know, there were no casualties. But at the same time,
Well,
they were also, they had air defenses near the bridge, taking out drones that were trying to strike the bridge as well. The bridge, I know there were reports in the West. Our colleague Lori Spencer sent me some links to that the bridge had been hit, but in fact, the bridge was not hit. So train traffic was stopped for about 8 hours last night. Car traffic was stopped for about 8 hours during these continuous attacks that were going on from about 1 a.m. to about 7, 8 o'clock this morning. And then they did open the bridge back up.
well, it is so difficult to know what to believe because, well, here I'll show you. Here on Twitter, well, X now. I hate that I have to say two names every
X
time.
Twitter?
Yes, there you go. So here's a photo that has been making the rounds on Twitter of the bridge hit, but that's an old image. That's not from
Yeah, that's last October.
today. Yeah. But that was posted, well, I guess earlier today on a few different social media accounts. And,
Yep.
then with captions saying the Crimean bridge has been hit. So I
I
understand.
can guarantee you that the bridge has not been hit. They did stop traffic, like I say. Longest stoppage that they've had, but it was simply because the drones were coming and coming and coming. And, they did open it up. There were about 300 cars in queue to go across the bridge. They've all gone across. The trains right now, they were delayed 8 hours. Now they're delayed, about 4 hours in their trips altogether.
And this is image or video of what appears to maybe be the ship being hit from a distance.
And you can actually see the bridge in the background there. And you can see the air defense going off up there.
Mm-hmm. And there's the explosion.
Yep.
So that ship worth, I'm seeing reports about $63 million.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably pretty close.
Wow.
Of course, when it was built, they didn't spend quite that much on it.
Here's this is no, there is no other footage. I thought this was additional footage of the ship being hit, but no, we've seen the footage that has been released now. So
Yeah.
yeah, and even that was, I was trying to be very careful last night when I was reporting on this. I did say there had been a report of an explosion near the bridge. I also reported that we were getting reports that ship may have been hit, but it's difficult to know exactly what's going on over there or anywhere right now, in fact, because the information coming out is so conflicting. You really, I think, at this point have to wait to make sure you're getting it from the right places.
You do. I mean, I got my last report saying that the ship sunk at 8 p.m. tonight, so about an hour or so ago. I've seen reports in the West saying the ship was worth $35 million, that it was the most modern warship equipped with the most advanced technology and weaponry. It's a patrol boat and it has 2 machine guns. So, there's some stretching going on there as far as value and, the equipment that the ship carries. It isn't a ship that is meant to, go to war. It's a patrol boat. It's basically a Coast Guard ship.
Right. Just kind of patrol, monitor, surveil, check for
Yep.
threats. It's a little smaller, so it has some speed capabilities, right? So that's what a
Yep.
patrol boat is meant to do. It's like a scout ship, if you will.
Right.
Yeah. And all this happening against the backdrop of information that we became aware of through you yesterday of Ukraine having real serious problems with their supply chain. What are you hearing on your end?
Well, is what I'm hearing is that they had this loss in Avdiivka, and it was kind of an embarrassment to Ukraine. And they created some stories about withdrawals on the orders of the commander, when in fact the troops had started withdrawing before he told them they could. They are filing criminal cases against the soldiers who left before they were ordered to leave, and the commanders that allowed their men to withdraw, saving their lives. So they're calling them, traitors. They should not have left without orders to leave. But these are commanders who saved their men's lives. And, so they're being treated fairly poorly by their own government. Now, a lot of these guys are, very tied to and stand behind the previous commander. And when he was removed, many of them said that, they wouldn't fight for this new guy. So they're going after all these guys who were loyal to the previous commander and removing them from their posts, which of course is driving down the morale in the Ukrainian troops. And but because their supply lines are basically shot, Russia, as late as this morning, was bombing infrastructure in Ukraine, which is rail lines and roads that they're bringing supplies in on. So they're short of heavy weapons. There's not enough ammunition for their artillery. The artillery is short. Their air defenses and their air defense missiles, they do not have enough of. Their electronic warfare systems, they have a shortage of. And they even have shortage of fuel and spare parts. So they're complaining to neighboring NATO countries that they need to get equipment repaired. But since they don't have the guys or the parts that can repair them, they have to ship this equipment to countries like Poland, and they have to be repaired there and shipped back. So it creates a big delay for things. They're claiming they have a shortage of UAVs. They did lose a big factory back a couple of weeks ago that we talked about. They don't appear to be having a great shortage of UAVs, but it seems like maybe they're using a majority of them to attack Crimea, mainly for the propaganda again. It's, they need to show these wins against Russia to be getting money and support from the United States, and they have to get the support from the United States to get it from Europe. And so they need to show that they have some wins. And unfortunately for us, Crimea tends to be a relatively easy target.
Yeah, it is a public relations target as well, because that bridge, it was for I think Vladimir Putin a source of pride, because when the bridge opened, he was there.
Yeah.
He took part in the ceremony to basically cut the ribbon and declare it
First
open.
one who drove across it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I certainly understand the public relations value in it? Is there, there has to be some strategic value as well. I'm seeing that Russia is engaged in building or trying to at least improve a rail line as an alternative route for transportation in the event that they do lose the bridge. So they're thinking ahead in that regard.
Mhm.
And that bridge, what does it connect? Just so you can explain to people its geographic importance.
The bridge connects the easternmost end of the peninsula to mainland Russia in the Krasnodar region. So it's 19 kilometers, about 8 miles long. And, as far as militarily, it really has no strategic value at all. The fighting isn't going on in Crimea. They can haul stuff here on ferries or by, supply ships, or, most of what they're sending is going from mainland Russia to the front, which is up over the top of the peninsula. And they do have a land route there already. They've got a highway there, and they're actually increasing that to a super highway, much like the Tavrida that they built in Crimea. And they're running this new rail line. They started that, last week, and that will actually cut the time to go from the mainland to Crimea from Moscow by a couple of hours. So, that could be a benefit for them as far as supply lines, because it's up where they need that equipment and where they need that ammunition. But the Crimean bridge, it's really just a supply line for consumer goods for the peninsula, and, for people to be able to easily go back and forth. For us to drive up and around by the land route to get to Krasnodar, it takes us an extra 4 to 5 hours to drive that. So it's a convenience thing. But at this point, it's no great strategic value other than, like you say, the pride that Putin has in it. And, if they do take it down, it would probably, hurt some morale of citizens of Crimea.
And there's symbolism there. It's showing that Crimea is part of Russia. That's the
Yes.
symbolic value of it. Yes. And,
But to take that bridge down is going to be extremely difficult. I mean, we have the leak of the Germans planning to supply long-range missiles to take the bridge out. And
Right.
in that conversation, they discussed that 20 of those missiles won't be enough to take the bridge down. They can damage roadway, but it only takes the Russian Federation a month or two to restore the roadway. And they've typically only been able to take half of it out, so they run traffic in one lane in each direction on the other side. But they say that it would take more than 20 of these missiles to be able to actually take the bridge out and put it out of commission totally.
that recording has become a focal point of controversy. What I politically, I see this recording that was leaked as being very problematic for Germany. It shows that NATO is maybe more involved in this conflict than they want the public to know.
Yeah,
your
and it
thoughts?
also shows that Germany wants the appearance of not being involved. They want the US and Britain to actually be the guys to, fire the missiles from Ukraine, the, ununiformed guys that are there that aren't really there. And, and the US and Great Britain are supplying all the intelligence for these other strikes anyway. Now, this week, Ukraine has made an attempt just a couple of days ago, 11 missiles going towards the bridge. They were all shot down by air defenses. and they at the same time shot, I don't remember, it was 8 or 10 at Sevastopol, and they were shot down over the peninsula as well. So, getting those missiles to the bridge is problematic because they do have it so well defended, and they show up on radar, which drones don't. But the drones aren't big enough that they're going to be able to do much but damage the road surface again.
Yeah. And you've talked to us before, and maybe you can just go over again briefly the kinds of improvements to the defenses that have been put in place to protect the infrastructure there in Crimea, and specifically around the bridge. What kind of tactics and technology are they using?
Well, they can flood that bridge in fog in just a few minutes. So that's the first thing they do, is they fire up those fog generating trucks and they drive them across the bridge. They have them stationed, along the bridge. So they can cover it very quickly. And at the same time, they use signal jamming technology. They take out the cellular service. They take out the GPS service. So the drones are basically flying blind. They can't pre-program the locations by GPS to actually get to the bridge. And then, of course, they've got air defenses all over the place. And they're movable air defenses. So they aren't positioned in one spot where Ukraine can, fly some dummy drones or dummy missiles over, get their location, and know that they're going to be there the next day. These trucks move around often, and the radar systems are truck mounted as well. They do have some permanent installations, in various locations. But, it comes down to, it's really that propaganda factor. If they can say, we took down the bridge, they can also say, gee, we can also take Crimea back. Now, a few weeks ago, we had the crazy talk that maybe they would go in and attack Yalta as a city and take the city. And Yalta would have no strategic importance to them. It's a tourist city, no military there, but they would be surrounded on three sides by military and the Black Sea Fleet on the seaside. So they literally have no way to go in and take that city without going through the Russian armed forces. It would have to be something like paratroopers dropping in and they would immediately be surrounded. So things like that are just crazy talk.
So we've seen Zelensky even acknowledge that they do have supply chain issues, resource issues. We've seen confirmation that the loss in Avdiivka was the result largely of supply issues. They don't have enough munitions, enough of anything.
Yeah.
This indicates that maybe we're, entering a new phase of this conflict, maybe even the end phase. What kind of analysis are you getting from your sources over there?
Well, what I'm getting on this side is they do not think they will be able to maintain fighting for more than the next month or so. There's, what I'm hearing is around May. They're retreating from a lot of places right now. They've lost all their heavy fortifications that they had been building for the last 10 years. And as they're losing them, they're trying to dig in more defensive lines, but Russia just isn't giving them the time to create good defensive lines. And, the men are refusing to fight. There's more and more men refusing to even be, sent to the military. They're fighting back on the streets when they're served with their summonses to show up for, the recruitment center. And, I just don't know what they're going to do. Last thing I heard out of Ukraine from a reliable source was that they have a good amount of troops to defend with, but they don't have the weapons to give them. And if they were going to try to take any land back or push the Russians back, they would need both equipment and men. So it's a shortage on both sides.
I've seen.
Now they did have a win this week. They, had some drones and missiles going over the peninsula. I don't remember if it was yesterday or the day before. It happens so often now. But some of the stuff was shot down, and it destroyed part of the Tavrida highway. So they blocked this new Tavrida highway for about 10 hours, repaved it, reopened it back up. So it was a minor thing. Now, that originally was reported by Ukraine as a major strike on a major city and a major ammo depot, but they basically destroyed a lane or two on the highway outside of Feodosia, which is the same area as the bridge and the ship. So it's been a constant attack in this one direction.
So I've said, and I'm just a layman, but it seems to me the Ukraine is getting into a situation where they will need to resort to, and I think they will, to more, and I don't know if this is exactly the right phrase or descriptive term, but more guerrilla style warfare tactics, where it's kind of like pinpoint here and a strategic strike there, instead of these full on head to head confrontations where you're seeing soldiers destroyed in a meat grinder, because that's the kind of warfare that you can wage without a lot of resources. And I think they'll need to resort to that, hoping that the aid is finally approved from the U.S. side that seems to be delayed, and then subsequently maybe get more aid in from Europe as well. But time is not on Ukraine's side at this point.
Right. And we're seeing more of that guerrilla warfare going on here. I saw, just as I was coming up to the studio, a report of a major fire that was caused by arson up in mainland Russia. Now, they claim it was a neighbor who had a fight with another neighbor, and, but you have to question, with the number of them that occur these days, how much of that is truth and how much of it is covering the fact that, it's some of this guerrilla warfare. There's just too many of these fires that are of unknown origin. We have arrests quite often here on the peninsula. We had an arrest earlier today of a woman who was receiving weapons and explosives from the Ukrainian Secret Service to be used for terrorist attacks in Crimea. Yesterday, we had a couple of arrests like that. So they're arresting these people all over the place. But, it seems to be so pervasive, it likely, they aren't going to get them all.
Yeah. So it's just a race against time for Ukraine. They need to hold on and hope that Biden comes through. But the U.S. administration seems to be fairly incompetent, to be blunt. And we're seeing now Victoria Nuland is preparing to step down. In fact, here I'll bring up the news release from the U.S. Department of State. And right there, Victoria Nuland has let me know that she intends to step down in the coming weeks as Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. And this is from Antony Blinken at the U.S. Department of State. So they're saying she's retiring, but if you read between the lines, I think there's more to it than that. What's your assessment?
Well, she was in line for the Assistant Secretary of State, and she really wanted that position, and Biden passed her over and put somebody else in the slot. So I think there's some hurt feelings there, and it's like, well, okay, then I'm going to quit and I'm not going to help you anymore. It could also be them pushing her out because she's a little too anti-Russia, pro-Ukraine. Let's give money and destroy Russia. And I could go that direction if the Biden administration's real goal is to start looking for a good way to get out of supporting Ukraine without saying, gee, we failed. So this would be a good move. Start with getting rid of her and start backing some things up. Biden's been playing the, gee, we're giving humanitarian aid to Palestine and the Gaza Strip by, dropping aid in the sea off of the coast and letting it float in. And, some things like that. He's pushing, gee, I want a peace agreement by Monday. And, they issued a peace agreement and Israel agreed to it, but Hamas didn't yet. So I think Biden is looking for ways to get out of multiple conflicts at this point. I think the people of the United States are tired of it. I think people in Europe are tired of being U.S. puppets. I don't know where Canada stands on all of it, but I have the feeling they're getting a little tired of it all as well. And, Ukraine is just a big thorn in the side at the moment. Newland went in there. She dealt with this commander-in-chief deal, trying to resolve that. It's been, more embarrassment. And I think the blame is being put on her for all that. But it's political objectives at this point. It's not military objectives they're trying to win.
Yeah, she's supposed to be a diplomat, but she has not ever really been very diplomatic. She has been a war hawk. She really has been. Blinken as well. And these policies have led us to this point. If there was a lot more diplomacy and less aggressiveness, I think maybe we wouldn't be facing these diplomatic, or shall I say, political disasters and these wars that we're engaged in right now. So I think you may have hit the nail on the head there. This seems to me as well, this resignation or retirement seems to indicate that the Biden administration might be looking for an off-ramp in what is an election year.
Yeah, well, when the guy named Not Committed is winning the election for the Democrats over there, it says a lot.
Very strange election cycle this time. I don't know. It's you have a president who is so out of touch, literally, with reality that you have an independent candidate in Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who the other day just demanded that he provide some sort of proof that he has the cognitive abilities to lead the American people. In other words, prove that you're still lucid.
Yeah.
So
I'm surprised nobody's demanded that of Trump, but he seems to be going, gangbusters out there on the Republican side. And some of the reports I've been hearing from contacts in Ukraine is that one of the things they're doing right now is they're trying to wait and see how this Super Tuesday comes out and see if Trump comes out as the next, assured Republican candidate. And if he is, that there are a lot of the politicians in Ukraine that want to go to the negotiating table at that point, because they know that the support will dry up and Trump will, play nice with Russia some more.
It's interesting to see how much power really Trump still has, how much influence over the political process he still has, even though he isn't the president, because, it's that MAGA Trump influence over everything that is also resulting in the delays for the additional funding for Ukraine. They've tied that to the situation at the border, where we just had this new court ruling saying that the state does have the jurisdiction to go ahead and start arresting people who are identified as possible illegal migrants coming in and not have to rely on the federal government. It's turned into a showdown between the states who are supporting Texas and the federal government over who actually has jurisdiction over the border and security. It's the strangest thing, and Trump's a major influence in that.
Yeah. You know, they have a constitutional
crisis is what
crisis,
it's turning into. Yeah.
But there is a you know, one of their I don't know, it's one of the amendments they've got where the states can actually by a majority vote say that they're throwing the federal government out of control and taking back control.
Yeah.
And this is something that was growing while I was still living over there. And they needed, I don't remember the exact numbers, but like 2/3 of the states, and they had about 50% of them signed up for this.
Yes.
So, you know, the federal government's going to have to do something, or the states are going to take control back from them.
Yes, and we're seeing that almost half the states do support the Texas position on the border. Immigration has become perhaps the number one issue in this election cycle as these guys race toward the White House. I don't know where that leaves the country. It's very volatile. As we get into the summer, I think you're going to see real unrest. Like we've seen buildings burned. We've seen riots in the streets. We've seen mass arrests. We've seen police not do anything to people in some cases who are out there causing all kinds of problems. This time around, I think, given the current state in the United States, the volatility, it's going to make the problems we've seen in the streets before look like a Sunday school picnic.
I agree. It's, you know, and there's a lot of these groups out there who are driving people to, you know, do things they wouldn't normally do. Excuse me. You know, people have to be careful where they're being led, you know, give some thought to what people are saying to them, think what makes sense, you know.
Well, when it comes to politics, the people who are trying to generate support for their movement, they generally will appeal to people on an emotional level. And when you get people enraged, they stop thinking rationally and they can easily be led astray. So yes, I mean, that's a message that I share with people here all the time. Think. And if people are telling you not to think, but you just act out of emotion, you better just stop and take a deep breath before you do anything at all, or you might end up in a heap of trouble. And speaking of trouble, we've got, I guess, a couple of military leaders on the Russian side who are, I guess, being targeted by the International Criminal Court.
Yeah, the head of the Black Sea Fleet has had an arrest warrant issued for him. I don't know much more, or the International Criminal Court, and I don't know what for, but you know, also the head of aviation of the Russian Air Force.
Right. So there are some reports just coming out from The Hague, Netherlands. Pre-trial Chamber 2 of the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Russian long-range aviation commander Sergei Kotov and Black Sea Fleet commander Viktor Sokolov for their involvement in crimes in Ukraine, the court's website reports. According to the court, Sergei Kotov and Viktor Sokolov are responsible for the following war crimes: attacking civilian objects, causing excessive incidental harm to civilians or damage to civilian objects, and a crime against humanity in the form of inhuman acts under Article 7(1)(k) of the Rome Statute.
Yeah, and you know, my view of this is it's their way to get out of the fact that recently they, denied Ukraine's claims of genocide and, you know, inhuman treatment in this special military operation. So it's almost like they had to come back and say, well, shame on you guys, because they're the ones in charge of shooting the missiles from ships and airplanes. But what are they actually striking? They're striking electric plants, which are a valid military target. They're hitting train tracks, which are valid military supply lines. And much like Ukraine does, if there's some soldiers in an apartment building shooting at them, they're going to shoot back. It's something people don't think about. But if you've got, 12 troops of country A in a civilian hospital or apartment building or school shooting at country B's men, that then becomes a valid military target. So I see this as, just they looked soft in that denying Ukraine's case. So now they have to come back with something hard again. And these guys probably couldn't care less.
And the International Criminal Court, it has really, I would say, pretty limited jurisdiction. I think there are, how many countries belong to the ICC? Is it 120, 123, something like that?
Something like
Russia,
that.
I think
Russia
Russia
does
has,
not.
right, they're not part of the ICC. They
The
withdrew their
United States
signature,
isn't.
right? The ICC, so the States is not a member. So they can charge them. They can say that, they're wanted, but they really just don't truly have jurisdiction to make arrests and affect prosecutions, in my view.
George Bush has, had a criminal arrest warrant against him for how many years? Doesn't seem to affect him at all.
Right. I know Canada is a member of the ICC, and I know that there are political groups, I believe pro-Palestinian groups actually, that are pursuing charges through the ICC against Justin Trudeau. And because Canada has signed on to it, he might actually be held accountable for his actions if found guilty. So that's a totally different scenario when you voluntarily submit to the jurisdiction of an international body like the ICC, giving up your sovereign immunity through the sovereignty of your own nation state. You've thrown yourself upon the mercy of the ICC, the International Criminal Court. So Trudeau's position is entirely different. But Putin, Biden, Trump, those guys, they're saying, no, we're immune because we have our own nation states and we don't recognize any authority that the ICC has.
Well, and if you look at Trudeau, if they do charge him, are they going to come to Canada and arrest him?
That's a really good question,
Yeah. I mean, I really view this court as having the same authority and power as the UN. The Security Council is a joke because no matter what goes in front of the Security Council, either Russia or the United States is going to veto it. So then it goes to the General Assembly. The General Assembly gets a majority of the countries to say, yes, this is what needs to be done. And then that's the last you hear of it. Nothing's ever done.
Well, this is a situation with Trudeau that he's like so many of the neoliberal woke progressives in this country. They engage in so much virtue signaling that that's what signing on to the ICC was, in my view. And in the case of Canada, oh yeah, we support the ICC. We're going to sign this. This is a great thing. It's another step toward globalism, and we support the international rules-based order under the ICC, blah blah blah. Right? So they sign on to this court and saying, oh yes, we're very supportive, and whatever this court rules, we will abide by. But now that would really be put to the test, wouldn't it? If these charges that are being leveled against Trudeau and the Liberal government here in Canada through these pro-Palestinian political organizations, if they go to trial, would Trudeau then say, well, I signed on, we signed on as a government here, so I have to take whatever the ruling of the ICC comes up with. I have to abide by it. So if they say I have to go to jail, or if, then I guess I'm going to jail. It really puts it to the test. I suspect that it's toothless. I think that it is all virtue signaling. I don't think that, even though Canada is a member of the ICC, I think if push comes to shove, he'll try to hide behind Canadian sovereignty and say, oh, no, you can't touch me. I'm Canadian. We don't recognize that. Oh, well, we'll see.
Well, has George Bush been to Canada?
That's a good question. Has Bush been to Canada? When? I'm going to Google that. When was the last visit by George Bush to Canada? George W. Bush was in Canada November 30th to December 1st in 2004. And that's the last time.
Okay, so let's see when he got a warrant from the International Criminal Court. Criminal Court. So I don't see the date here, but I would venture it was 2009. Okay, so he hasn't been to Canada since.
Yeah.
So I wonder if he did go, if Canada would arrest him.
That's the other question, right?
Yeah.
Putin
was going to go to the BRICS meeting in South Africa. And the South African president said, I'm not going to arrest him. Mm-hmm. And then he got pushback from his opposition party saying, no, we're members, so you have to. And I don't think that was ever resolved, other than the fact that Putin said, well, I'm not going anyway.
It creates real conflicts, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Moral and legal. And it puts the ICC to the test. It puts the moral conviction of these world leaders to the test. How much is virtue signaling? How much is real?
Yeah. It all comes out of the UN, and I think I think their time has come to go with NATO the way of somewhere else.
Yeah, it does show that, I've said for a long time, NATO is a big sort of part of the problem. They sit there, they have these long meetings, they come up with these resolutions, and then in the end, nothing happens. It's just, it seems like such a waste. But these are, the UN, it goes back to the League of Nations and this vision of the future where you have all the nations of the world working together in what really is sort of a globalist vision to prevent war. But in reality, it has turned into this political omelet of lumps and weird. I don't know. I'm having trouble coming up with the proper metaphor off the top of my head, but it's a mess, is what it is. It doesn't result in has not resulted in any resolutions to any of these issues. We still have the conflict in the Middle East. We still have the conflict in Gaza. It hasn't solved any of that. In fact, right now it seems to be at as bad as it has ever been since World War II.
Well, there's still a conflict in Serbia and Kosovo, a breakaway region supported by NATO under orders from the UN, which never approved going in there in the first place. So, it's just, I don't know, too much applying pressure from different sides to get what they want.
Yes.
Yugoslavia. NATO had no authority to go in there from the United Nations, and they decided, oh, we're going to do it anyway. They go in, they break the country up. They actually were charged by the UN's International Court of Justice again. And, what happened? Nothing.
And what's the
They
point?
still have NATO troops in there.
And what is the point in a body like the UN if you have, two countries like Russia and the United States, which sometimes are at odds with each other on policies, and they have veto powers. So it doesn't, like, all these other countries can vote for something, but if the United States doesn't see eye to eye with what it is, then they just say no, and then it's rejected anyway. And Russia has the same power. I just don't.
And China.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just, what's the point in going through the exercise if the real power really lies with the superpowers anyway? That's the political reality. That's political realism, right in your face. So the UN, it's toothless.
It's kind of, kumbaya, my lord, kumbaya.
Well, we're getting to some deeper discussions on politics here. Anything else we haven't touched on here with regard to the situation in Ukraine and Russia?
No, I don't think so. I think we just need to kind of sit and watch what's going to happen over the next few weeks. I think that'll be pretty telling. The political situation in the United States shouldn't drive this conflict, but is and will. So I think we just have to wait and see. People where I am, we've gotten used to the drones and the aircraft guns going off all the time. It's, part of normal life and not a big worry.
Well, no question, the developments we've seen just over the last week indicate we are entering a new phase in this conflict in Ukraine. Today, the announcement from Victoria Nuland that she's stepping aside, that signals maybe a change in policy direction or policy strategy coming from maybe the Biden administration, which I think is actually a sign of hope, because I'd like nothing more than to see the conflict come to an end so that the killing stops. I
saw Lloyd Austin is under questioning about the fact that he keeps disappearing for medical treatment and telling nobody about it. I think his career is short-lived as well.
Yeah. And I think Biden is probably, or at least the people pulling the strings behind the scenes, are looking for solutions to not just the war, but the public relations disaster they have on their hands as they start to get into the nitty-gritty of this presidential election cycle. So, Kevin, we're going to have to keep an eye on things very closely in the weeks ahead, especially over the next month, and we'll continue to rely on you to keep us updated.
Well, I'll keep letting you know when I see things.
All right, and until your next visit, please tell people again how they can find your work so they can follow you.
You can find me on YouTube at American Crimea. And from there, you can get to anything that we produce. So thank you for having me, Rick.
All right. Our privilege, sir. And folks, we will be right back after this.